Good evening and welcome to Watchmen on the Wall. Tonight, we will take a closer look at the abortion debate. Is abortion a woman's right, or is it the murder of the most innocent and most vulnerable of human life? A total of 77,771 legal abortions were performed in South Africa in 2011 alone, which indicates a 31% increase since 2010, during which 59,000 abortions were performed. The latest stats translate to nearly 25,000 more abortions than the annual average of legal abortions over the past 10 years, the Beeld newspaper reported. The province with the highest abortion rate is the Free State, where more than 20,000 abortions were performed during 2011, followed by over 12,000 in the Northwest and more than 11,000 in Gauteng. Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi released the stats on Monday, 20th August, in response to a parliamentary question. His spokesperson, Joe Mailer, said, "The latest figures were a matter of great concern. We are very worried, not only about the high numbers, but also about the fact that so many people are having unprotected sex." It appears government is not so much concerned about the terrible and callous loss of innocent life as it is about the fact that people are not using condoms. Sherilyn Dudley, ACDP MP, said that her party was very disappointed in the latest figures. It looks like we're moving in a direction where human life is being increasingly disregarded and treated with contempt. People are becoming so cold-hearted. It starts with unborn babies and ends with minors being shot, she said. The spiraling rates of abortions in South Africa should be of great concern to every citizen that values the sanctity of human life. Since taxpayer-funded abortion on demand was legalized on the 1st of February 1996, more than 1 million unborn babies were murdered in the womb. The abortion holocaust is probably the greatest indictment against South Africa's claims of being a caring and compassionate democracy. If a survey was conducted today on public support for abortion on demand, we will find that the majority of citizens do not and have never supported this policy. Abortion clinics and backstreet obituaries usually advertise safe and pain-free abortions. But how can you advertise a procedure as safe and pain-free when one life is ended and another is deeply wounded for life? Tonight, I will speak to Sherilyn Dudley, the ACDP MP and member of the Health Portfolio Committee in Parliament. In February 2010, Sherilyn tabled a private member's bill in the National Assembly that, if adopted, would have significantly reduced abortions in South Africa. That amendment was rejected in Parliament in 2010, and today reports indicate that abortions in South Africa are spiraling out of control. I will also speak to Dr. Chris Wharton, a medical doctor, anatomist, and senior lecturer at the Health Sciences faculty at the UCT Medical School. The pro-life movement in South Africa appears anemic and lacks major public support. However, there are committed and passionate individuals working tirelessly to make a difference for life. One such person is pro-life activist Peter Throck, who is currently being threatened by the city of Cape Town for covering illegal backstreet abortion advertisements with value life stickers. I will speak to Peter Throck about his battle with the city of Cape Town in our segment that highlights ordinary Christians doing extraordinary things to make a difference in society. Jackie Georgia will speak to Christian counsellor Denise EV about her work with women who have aborted their babies. But before we speak to our esteemed guest this evening, here's our news contributor, Jackie Georgia, with the weekly news roundup. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Errol. Welcome to your Global Christian News Roundup. Tonight, we open with news from Nigeria, where Christian President Goodluck Jonathan is being threatened by a militant terrorist group. Over the last few months, Boko Haram have gone on a killing spree, murdering hundreds of Christians, burning down churches, and attempting to make the country ungovernable. Responding to the threats, President Jonathan stated that he would not comply with their demands, as he was mandated by the people of Nigeria when elected in 2011 to govern Africa's most populated country. According to a recent census, 50% of Nigerians profess to be Muslim, with 48% being Christian, and religious tensions are running high in the country. Please pray for Nigeria, and specifically for President Jonathan, who endures weekly death threats. Moving to Great Britain now, respected Christian voice and former Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Carey, has warned that Western Christians are being vilified by the state and treated as bigots for simply expressing their beliefs. England has seen a marked increase in legal cases being brought against Christian workers and organizations for simply exercising their faith. Kerry argues that the British courts have failed to protect Christian values, as seen recently when an air hostess for British Airways was fired for wearing a cross necklace to work. Lord Kerry has urged European judges to correct the balances in a landmark case taking place at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg at the moment. The hearing will take into account this case, as well as that of Gary McFarlane, a counsellor fired for saying that he would not be comfortable offering sex therapy to homosexual couples. Please pray for this court case and for a favourable outcome, as it will set an international precedent for Christian liberties. Finally, in Cuba, thousands of people gathered for a Christian crusade in the capital of Havana recently. Over 10,000 people came together as part of what some have called a revival in the communist nation. Churches in Cuba worked together for months, planning an evangelistic meeting that drew crowds in a large public square in the city. According to Bishop Ricardo Pereira, a Methodist church leader who delivered a sermon on that day, we are seeing a spiritual fruit born from a dry and thirsty land. It is only the hand of God that can cause such a great response. Following the success of the crusade and salvations of many that day, a number of outdoor meetings are planned for later this year. We praise God for this result and trust that the gospel will continue to spread there. That's a wrap from Watchmen on the Wall News. Stay tuned for Errol Naidu after the break.
Welcome back. Good to be with you this evening. In the studio with us this evening, we have Sherilyn Dudley, ACDP MP and a member of the Health Portfolio Committee in Parliament. Good evening and welcome. Sherilyn, thanks for joining us in the studio here this evening.
Hi, Errol. It's lovely to be here with you.
Sherilyn, we're talking about the abortion issue, and we've seen in the media that you tabled a private member's bill in 2010 to deal specifically with reducing abortions in South Africa. We've also seen now by a report by the Health Minister in Parliament that abortions has increased by 31%. This is obviously alarming, even to government, but they have a different spin on that. Sure. Tell us a little bit about that bill, what happened in 2010.
Well, that bill was the second bill that the ACDP had actually put forward, but proposed as a private member's bill. The first one was a constitutional amendment to protect the right to life of the unborn child. That clearly didn't it didn't hang around too long. It was defeated very rapidly. The second bill was, I'd planned to be far more strategic with this bill. And we came from the angle
You're talking about the bill in 2010,
the
amendment.
The second bill was an amendment to the Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act, and that we wanted to be far more strategic. We realized that it was just too simple to dispose of the previous proposal.
And what was the objectives with that bill?
The second one, the amendment to the CTOP Act, the objective was actually just to lower the risk to mother and child, obviously, in terms of health risks and the mortality of the babies in our eyes. So the understanding there would be clearly, whilst the legislation does make counselling something that should be done, it doesn't make it mandatory. And we were actually proposing that the legislation should make not just counselling mandatory, but a particular kind of counselling, a counselling that's relevant, a counselling that will actually give a mother the kind of information that she needs to make an informed decision.
And you were hoping with this amendment that you would reduce abortions in South Africa quite significantly.
Clearly, my understanding would be that if a woman was able to get the actual facts about what was happening at that particular time in terms of a child growing within her, that clearly she would make, in most cases, a different decision. Because when a woman's facing a situation where she's not getting the facts, where she's understanding this to be some kind of lump of tissue and nothing really in terms of life, it is far easier to make the mistake of making a decision in favor of an abortion. And of course, once you have a child later on in life and you watch that baby growing within you, that woman's going to be clearly informed as to what is taking place, and that's traumatic.
Now, obviously your objective was, with the amendment to the Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Bill, we've got to get that right. The amendments was aimed at reducing abortions in South Africa. Now you see in Parliament that abortions have increased by 31% in South Africa,
Well, the
2010
latest-
compared to about 2011 compared to 2010.
Yeah.
We also see in the media that there are an abortion every 10 minutes amongst young girls in the Eastern Cape. We're seeing reports like that all over the country, and so obviously this thing is spiraling out of control. Do you believe that your amendment would have helped and that it would have stopped this, or do you think this is just the way our value system is in South Africa, and that we're going to see this anyway?
I do think that many, many more women and girls would have made different decisions if they had the actual facts. And I think it's really in this particular day and age where people value democracy and transparency, it is particularly problematic that women are given that kind of a choice and they're expected to make it without the relevant facts.
From what I saw in the media, when you tabled this bill, a number of pro-abortion groups came forward to attack the bill, and so it was defeated in Parliament. What was your support like from pro-life groups, from churches coming to support your bill, the amendment bill?
Well, first of all, what was interesting was because I had intended being far more strategic in terms of this piece, in this proposal, we had an understanding that the pro-life groups were going to take a little bit of a back seat, because really what we were proposing is something that pro-abortion, pro-life, pro-anything groups could actually get behind it, because this was about the risks to the mother, and this was about improving the quality of life, and also just it was about constitutional values. It was about women having information so they can make an informed so that informed consent would be the result. So I had full support from the Christian doctors, medical associations, all of that kind of thing. So we aimed and we focused it far more strategically, which actually did work to a large degree, because this bill did see a much longer time of being on the table. And we did initially have some support from gender groups, UCT gender groups. We actually had the Gender Commission supported initially, until, of course, the human rights lawyers sort of clicked into gear and got excited about the fact that obviously this was a thin edge of the wedge proposal by the ACDP to kind of undermine abortion generally. And then they came with that angle. And look, at the end of the day, yes, I was quite open. Everybody knows the stand of the ACDP. We do not support the liberal abortion laws in this country today. And we would actually like to see protection, not just for the moms, but also for those unborn children. However, the piece of legislation that was on the table was not a piece of legislation that was actually attacking the principle of abortion.
Or the rights of women.
It was really attacking the fact that women did not have the kind of information they needed to make the kind of decision that they were facing.
Yeah, we obviously support that. If women have good information, proper information before they make a decision, they're obviously going to make a better
And what was really interesting was at the time, in the early days, and the passion, the kind of arguments that the pro-life groups would bring around abortion was entirely emotional. Nothing to do with what was relevant in today's
not
world.
reasonable.
The pro-life presentation was entirely rational, and the human rights lawyers were not in the least bit rational. They were entirely emotional, crazy, all over the place.
They believed
because
your amendment was going to take away the rights of women.
Well, yes, so they were just fiercely defending
abortion.
their end goal, and therefore it was fine if women were at risk.
In light
the
of
process.
the information that we now have, there's 31% increase in abortions, and it looks like it's just trending upwards. Will you table another amendment in Parliament, common sense amendments that will help give women better information, ultrasound scans that they could see that before they make the decision? Would you do this again? And if we helped you get the support through Watchmen on the Wall and Family Policy Institute?
Yeah, well, this particular proposal did include ultrasound being available. This is entirely possible. My idea would be to actually bring it even smaller, narrow it down to even less than what we were actually bringing at the time. So to be even more strategic. So we can go one of two ways. We could either propose the bill again with minor changes and have that kind of full support. But my experience is that over the years that people by and large have tuned out that pro-life grouping, and the minute that they hear any kind of rallying in that direction, it's just immediately everybody's on their guard and shuts everything down. So my feeling is that we need to be strategic. We need to go really down to the little things. Just start kind of focusing on little areas where we can actually improve and get a situation where women are honestly going to be able to look at it and make a decision for themselves. Is this really what I want? Do I really want to do this kind of violence to myself or my child? Is it going to help me in the long run? Is it the solution in this situation? And I believe that if we have the right kind of counselling and women are able to see exactly what is taking place within them in terms of that developing life,
Yes.
they are not going to come to that conclusion. And I do think that we'll see a reduction. Now, we know that the latest figures talk about 77,771. But in my 3 questions that I had put to the Minister, there was a different number on each of those responses.
And obviously it doesn't take into account the backstreet abortions.
Well, this is the thing, because initially the whole argument around this was that there are so many backstreet abortions, and so for the sake of women who are dying because of backstreet abortions, we need abortion. Now, the truth is that backstreet abortion numbers have not decreased. All we have is an additional 80,000 plus babies.
That's
now, why
right.
I say 80,000 plus babies is because that number that the department gives us is a number minus the babies that are aborted due to the RU486 drug. And that's a policy that in my early days on the Health Committee, the department had actually adopted in terms of allowing that pill, which is not meant for abortion, to be given for abortions to take place. So what happens there is that the woman or girl is given the pill, she goes away, she either aborts the baby outside of a facility, or by the time she gets to a facility, the process is already underway, and therefore it would be recorded as a miscarriage and not an abortion at all.
That's frightening.
So that 77,000 is not a real figure. The real figure is much more than that.
Yeah. Sherilyn, we want to thank you for coming into the Watchmen on the Wall Studios and sharing this information with us. We know that you need a lot more support. The pro-life movement needs to grow. It's very weak and anemic in South Africa at the moment. And you need that support in Parliament from Christians, from pro-life groups to push through your amendments. Sherilyn, thank you for your pro-life stance in Parliament, for being a staunch supporter of the pro-life movement in the legislature, and thank you for coming into the studio. When we come back, more on the abortion debate. Welcome back, and we're going to continue our debate on the abortion issue. In the studio with me, I have Dr. Chris Wharton, a medical doctor and lecturer. Dr. Wharton also teaches anatomy and the development of human life at UCT. Dr. Wharton, welcome, and thank you for joining us at Watchmen on the Wall.
It's a pleasure to be here.
The abortion debate usually centers around policy and political issues, but it's also an ethical issue. And one of the most fundamental questions we need to answer is does life begin at conception?
I think that is a critical issue. And one of the problems, before I answer that question, I think, is that very often when one's faced with the abortion situation, one's very much aware of a young woman who's in a state of crisis. And there's often tragedies in the situation.
That's
and
right.
You can see the whole scenario. And the focus is on the mother for obvious reasons. And the question of whether there's somebody else directly involved often gets lost. And
You're talking about the human life?
I'm
in the
talking
womb.
about whether or not the baby or fetus or embryo, whatever we want to call it, is a person or not. And I think that's absolutely critical. And that's what the ethics of the whole thing rests around.
But in your experience as a medical doctor,
Yeah.
can you emphatically say this evening that life does begin at conception?
Yeah. There's no question from a biological perspective. There's obviously the spiritual side of things and so on. But from a biological perspective, when a particular sperm gets into a particular egg, at that point, our biological life has begun. And if we could read what's in the cell at that point, if we'd been able to read your cell when that sperm met that egg, we could describe you in detail as accurately as if we were looking at your identical twin. Your life biologically begins at conception. And that's the biology of it. Now, obviously, it's very, very different from later on, and we develop and things get more complicated. But as a living organism, life begins at conception.
So that view of life at conception, do you think it's shared widely amongst the medical fraternity in South Africa?
You know, the problem is it kind of depends what you want to do with it, you see. One of the difficulties, you can say that's the way it is biologically, but then sometimes people say, well, for this reason or that reason or that reason, I don't want to buy into that. What is certainly true that people take it seriously early on. The whole stem cell debate, and there are many people who wouldn't at all call themselves Christians, but there's a consciousness that stem cells, which involves really the destruction of an embryo in the first week or two of life,
Yes.
People take it seriously. It's not the same as taking a biopsy from somebody's toe. People take it seriously. Now, I would suggest that in consistency, we need to look at conception and say the big event happens there. Thereafter, there's an enormous amount of development. But that actually is the beginning, and you can't actually draw any lines subsequent to that. Certainly biologically you can't. Spiritually we can discuss that, and we can take that backwards and forwards. But biologically, that's actually when the life of the individual organism begins, and that's just the way it is.
And so your work in promoting this concept of human life, you go around lecturing. What is people's reaction when you teach on life and the preciousness of life, and that it does begin at conception?
I think it's a hugely emotionally laden thing.
Yes, it is.
So I think if one talks about development of the embryo, if somebody hasn't had a bad experience, I'm just conscious as I talk to classes and so on, as I teach medical students, there may well be girls in the class who've had an abortion. And obviously it's a huge thing. And their response, understandably, is going to have a whole lot of emotional baggage attached to it. Or somebody else might feel, as a matter of principle, women need their rights and they need the freedom to be able to have an abortion. And they feel that very strongly for various reasons. Now, I believe very much that women should have the rights for protection and the rights for self-determination in all sorts of ways. I agree completely. All right? I have 4 daughters myself. I'm all for that. But the real question is there another person that's losing more than the mother's gaining? And so the response of people varies. Some people just find the whole thing amazing, and the development of the embryo is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But then for other people, as I say, it's got fearful connotation.
I'm sure you've seen reports in the media that 31% increase in abortions in South Africa, 2011 against 2010,
Yeah.
and also that there's an abortion every 10 minutes in the Eastern Cape, for example.
Yeah.
Now, people are using abortion as a contraception in South Africa, and this is obviously very worrying, very concerning.
Yeah.
Do you think the medical fraternity in South Africa should get more involved in talking about this issue? Because a lot of it is driven by ideology, and we're trying to get past the ideology to get the facts to people. Do you think there's a growing movement amongst doctors in South Africa to get the truth out there, or do you think that the pro-abortion movement is winning the debate in South Africa?
You know, I think there's division within the medical community on this, and it's division because of people's background beliefs. So I think one will find generally as a principle that Christian people, and I think sometimes Muslim people as well, will be saying, hang on a moment, this is not right in principle.
Because of their belief system.
Because of their belief system. I think obviously our ethics don't come from nowhere, they're built on a foundation.
That's right.
And so if you have a foundation that takes life very seriously, and you have a strong ethical foundation, then you've got something to argue with. I think what tends to happen is once something gets legalized, people have the idea that if it's legal, it's right.
That's right, yeah.
And one of the problems, people have always said, well, young women are going to have abortions anyway, so we should legalize it so that it's safe. And you say, well, they won't necessarily have abortions anyway. I understand in America, the number of abortions went up tenfold when it was legalized. because there are a lot of people who actually don't want to do something illegal, but if it's legal, there's the implication it's right.
And sometimes they have justification. When people say that to me, my answer is usually apartheid was legal.
Yeah.
And nobody agrees that that was right just because it was legal.
Yeah.
But we're fighting a huge battle in South Africa. And I was saying to Sherilyn Dudley, our guest earlier, that the pro-life movement in South Africa is very weak. It's not as strong as we see in other nations. What do your suggestion on how we can grow and strengthen the pro-life movement in South Africa?
I think there's a couple of ways one can do it. There's the formal pro-life approach that gets a lot of media coverage and so on, and has happened in different ways here. But there's also the very real practical thing of just talking about the reality of things. For me, one of the key issues is, what does the baby look like?
And that's what Sherilyn was talking about.
Yeah.
The amendments to the abortion bill is to get that information to people so that they can make informed decisions. You think that will be helpful if women can actually see the ultrasound?
Helpful. I think often young women don't realize what the embryo, fetus, baby looks like.
Yeah, that's right.
And just to look, I remember somebody coming into my office. I work in an anatomy department, so we have specimens one kind or another, and I had a fetus, or we would call a fetus, in a container in my office. And she came in and she looked at it and she said, you know, when I came in here, I would have thought abortion was obviously right. But looking at that, how can you kill that? Now, I'm inclined to feel that that information needs to be there. And one of the things I think must be dreadful for a young woman who's had an abortion, often as a young teenager, often in ignorance, not realizing really what's going on, and then 5 years later she picks up a popular magazine and actually sees what the fetus baby looked like. It must be shattering.
And it changes her heart and her attitude.
Yeah, but now it's too late. You know, what have I done?
That's
what
right.
have I done?
That's right.
And so my feeling is it's just a matter of spreading information as much as anything else. You know, what is the truth on it? What does the baby look like? It's a wonderful subject. It doesn't need to be a nasty subject. It's a wonderful subject. The development of the baby, this is what it looks like. The fingers are here, the toes, and all the rest of it. This is what it looks like.
But that's precisely the problem in South Africa. We're not getting the truth out there. Not many people are speaking the truth and getting this kind of information out. And I think we're losing the battle because the pro-abortion movement is a lot more passionate and committed to their agenda. But Dr. Wharton, we are so grateful that you came into the studio to share your wisdom with us. Thank you. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In the studio with us this evening, we have Peter Throck, a pro-life activist who spends much of his time at the Mary Stopes Clinic in Cape Town praying for the loss of life in South Africa. Peter, welcome to the studios and thank you for joining us. You're currently involved in a dispute with the city of Cape Town because you're putting value life stickers over illegal abortion advertisements all over the city of Cape Town. Please tell us about that.
Thank you, Errol, and I want to thank you for inviting me onto the show. Errol, I don't believe that I'm doing anything wrong. This plague of abortion notices and penis enlargement and womb cleansing is just another way of saying abortion. Our areas are inundated with these posters.
Is this all over the city of Cape Town?
Well, it's not in Century City and it's not in Plattekloof and Constantia, but it's in the main thoroughfares, the shopping centres outside the railway stations. And for me to take a value life sticker, which is such a small bumper sticker, and to stick it on top of these offensive, ugly advertisements that our public and our society must face every day. The motive for doing this is that our societies are being desensitized, dehumanized, and being made to accept this. And for the city officials to come after me and to threaten me that if I continue this action, they will be forced to prosecute me.
What are they doing? Do you know what they're doing about the illegal advertisements that people are sticking up all over the city?
Well, Errol, I started 2 years ago scraping the abortion signs off of the lamppost. This is a Christian's weapon of mass destruction. So you can destroy the poster. And when it was first covered in the local newspaper, the Chief Environmental Officer for the City of Cape Town, Debbie Evans, her comment was that Mr. Throck must be very careful because he's breaking the law. He can be prosecuted for removing that poster. Only a law
Officer of the law
can remove that poster.
even though the poster is illegal.
Yeah. Now, having since read the bylaws, I don't see where she gets that from. But again, when somebody went out there and did something constructive to take the poster off, the immediate reaction was, you're not allowed to do that, you know? So I've put up with this for 2 years, and I've seen that the council, the officials, I don't believe they have the resources to cure this. They're not putting the resources into it. There's so little cleaning going on that it's negligible. And I don't make this as an idle statement, because I will say to the council, bring forward your records, bring forward your auditors, let's see.
Another issue is that backstreet abortions are notorious for harming women.
Oh, yes.
Harming women's health. People are even dying through illegal backstreet abortion. So what you're doing is also helping stop this scourge of backstreet abortions. Do you believe that?
I believe that sincerely. What these stickers are doing through the information that is on them, they are telling the would-be victims that this is not the way to go. It makes 3 statements of truth. It's also got 2 websites which can lead the would-be victims into knowledge of to what they're about.
What are those websites?
Those websites are...
www.abort73.com.
That's right, and www.180movie.com.
We'll put that up on the screen
Yeah.
so people can go to those websites.
They're very comprehensive. The Abort 73 has been around for many years. And in that website, it has the procedures of how abortions are performed. It has a lot of information for would-be victims.
to help them understand
help
and
them
better
understand
inform
what they're
them
doing,
about
yeah.
the decision they're making.
Yeah. And from a Christian point of view, there is an 8-page document in there called the Biblical Mandate to do something about abortion. And that document quotes the Bible very comprehensively. So if Christians are confused over this issue, they just need to go and read that 8-page document.
What do you say about the argument that you cannot fight a battle that is illegal and wrong by doing something illegal yourself? What is your response to that argument?
We are to give Caesar what is due to Caesar. What is due to Almighty God is our first obligation. If Caesar has not earned the right to be given what is given to him, then he doesn't deserve it to be given to him.
I see. What is Value Life all about? What is the ministry all about?
The Value Life came to myself as personal ministry. We're in a difficult time in our country where we have a ruling party who wants to dedicate our land to the ancestors, not on a Christianity footing. I believe the foundation has been laid for the debate to commence right now on euthanasia. So I believe that placing this Value Life cross across the nation, and we can place it legally across the nation because the evil has laid the foundation in the public eye for us to put that cross legally on top of the evil. And I believe that God wants this country to start a revival and to start to value
Life.
life.
I believe that too. And we spoke to our previous guests about the fact that the pro-life movement is weak and ineffectual in South Africa. You're one of the people that are usually standing there on your own for hours, sometimes from 5 in the morning outside abortion clinics praying. Do you get a lot of support when you do that?
Yes, I do. I even got one lady who brings me a cup of coffee.
That's good.
It's very, very nice. But, you know, people have to do what they feel is their relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. It's not about religion, it's about relationship with the Lord. And if your relationship is not right with the Lord, if you're not right within yourself, if you're not moving in your relationship and moving into action, then I fail to see how you can be comfortable. I mean, I've heard Christians, and there's Christians that work in these places. I've heard them say, "Oh, I'm against abortion, but I believe that everybody has the right to choose." You're not pro-life. You're pro-choice.
And the baby doesn't have a right to choose.
That's right. You might sound politically correct or very noble by making such a statement, but it's a ludicrous statement to make. You're not pro-life, you are pro-choice.
So if you're pro-life, you have to protect life under all circumstances. Peter, thank you for coming into the studio and sharing and giving your side of the story.
Errol, I would like to thank you too, and I would like to give you one of these, a battle dress.
Thank you so much.
So that you can wear it in the public eye.
I will do that. I value life. I like the scripture on the Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil.
Amen.
Peter Throck, thank you for coming to the studio.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, we had the privilege of listening to Errol and Peter Thorpe, and we thank them for their contribution. And tonight we're joined by Denise EV. She is the founder of Anchor of Hope and also runs programs in schools teaching sexual integrity and biblical values. Denise, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jackie.
Now, Denise, abortion is a big topic in South Africa at the moment, and we see that the media often tries to dehumanize the abortion issue, providing us with statistics and with reports. As a counsellor, though, you deal with the other side. Can you share with us some of your experiences of the trauma that ladies go through when they have abortions?
Yes, the actual abortion is very traumatic. When it physically happens, it's often not what they expect. There are often physical problems due to an abortion, but the emotional trauma is a lot longer lasting, and it doesn't always hit them straight away. It does in some people, and it results in tremendous guilt and depression. For other ladies, it's maybe 5 years, 10 years from then, and especially when they have their first pregnancy within a marriage. It's very traumatic because they then relive the pregnancy that was aborted.
I would imagine as well, with many people having abortions in secret, that can carry some long-term disorders and just stress on the lady.
Tremendous stress. I think depression is one of the things that carries through their lives for quite a number of years, and one of the reasons is that they remember the date of the abortion, the same as we remember the date of a child being born. For them, they will remember this abortion date, but not be able to re-grieve that baby because it's not supposed to be in there. So it's a very vicious cycle.
Now, Denise, often the medical industry describes a fetus or a baby, as we would say, as a blob of tissue or a collection of cells. And I think that that's done intentionally to help women come to terms with having an abortion. What is your experience with just women dealing with alien invasions in their body, as they'd like to term it?
Unfortunately, a lot of the young girls that I do counsel come to me for abortions, or the fact that they do feel that this is an alien. They do feel it's something they don't want, they just want to get rid of it. And they have this idea it isn't a life, it's just a thing. I have got an example of a fetus of 12 weeks. And as you can see, it is fully formed, this nervous system is in place, everything is there. And it's definitely a little human being, and there's no ways it's just one cell. And that is what we're aborting. We're aborting this very life, this fully formed life.
Now, Denise, you work in rural communities as well as urban areas. Do you find that the reasons that women come for abortions differ across the economic groups?
Definitely. I find that the more wealthy environment, it's more of a convenience. I just don't want this baby right now. It's not the guy I want to have a baby with. My parents might be upset. It's not going to fit in with my lifestyle. For the poorer community, there are different reasons. Sometimes it's pressure from a boyfriend. Often with the young girls that are 13, 14, 15, it's pressure from a mom. Her mom will say, listen, you're not going to have this baby, you're going to have an abortion. So parents put a lot of pressure on, boyfriends put a lot of pressure on, as well as sometimes we have a rape situation, and this young girl feels she can't go through the pregnancy because she's been raped. In cases like that, we as Christians are very judgmental. We just look at this person and we've heard they've had an abortion and we say, well, how could they have done that? you need to look at the girl's circumstances and as Christians really pray for them and walk with them. Find out where they're coming from, where they're at.
Denise, you raised such an important point there. I think that often Christians tend to view issues in black or white, right or wrong, and it isn't that cut and dried often.
No.
And as a Christian counsellor, I suppose you need a lot of understanding and compassion. What would your advice be to Christians, especially other counsellors, churches and individuals who are approached by a woman who would want an abortion?
I feel we need to show the love of Christ, number one. And, we have to show the same compassion and forgiveness that Christ showed. And we need to point them in the right direction that abortion is not the only answer.
I would imagine as well that it's a long-term process, especially if someone's had a traumatic abortion.
Yes.
We need to be sensitive to that and not to judge them.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier on that often with women who've had abortions, they don't even feel that they are Christian anymore.
Yes. And in the church, we have to be careful that we haven't got this attitude of if you've had that kind, had a sin of that kind in your life, that you're not going to be a Christian. You can never be a Christian, that you're a completely bad person, because we all deserve a second chance of forgiveness. We need to reach out in forgiveness for that. And often in the church can be one area where women feel they can't come clean even with the pastor. If the pastor knew that I had an abortion, it would be terrible. I'd be kicked out the church. So, do we leave our members with that kind of environment, that kind of feeling that they're not safe? They can't come speak to us about anything that concerns them.
Now, Denise, we see that statistically it's often teenagers that are going for the abortions, and I know that you work in schools extensively with programs. Why do you think abortion is increasing so drastically amongst the youth?
One of the reasons is our moral standards. And we don't have moral standards according to the Bible. We have our own moral standards. We have this also in the rural communities, very much the poorer community of the stronger survives and the weaker ends up with nothing. And we have that very much of the sort of animalistic kind of behavior where I get what I want and I do what I want because I can, because I feel like it. Where we come back to the Bible, ethical morality this is what the Word of God says. It's a completely different base we're working from.
Now, when you're dealing with someone who has that mindset and probably is not a Christian or is quite hard from the experience, how do you counsel them?
One of the areas we try and guide them to is to look at the fact of choices that they have available to them when they're pregnant, and that abortion is not the only answer. We can look at adoption. Adoption means that they can go through the pregnancy, but they don't have to look after the baby. There are many childless couples in South Africa and across the world. We deal with a fantastic adoption agency called ProCare from Wellington. And they are very professional, they are wonderful Christians, and people are scrutinised and their whole background is cleared with the police to make sure they have no criminal sexual records, stable homes, Christian homes, financially stable. And this is a wonderful opportunity for the mother to be able to give this baby a chance at life and give another couple an opportunity to be able to adopt a baby that they couldn't have on their own.
And in your experience, would you find that the trauma of giving a baby up for adoption is less than that of having an abortion?
Yes, definitely. There's no guilt associated with it because of the difference of the way you're dealing with it. Is one, you're taking a life, the other one, you're giving a baby a chance at a life. And as I've said to the couples or the young woman that's pregnant, is in a sexual relationship, when we find we're pregnant, we suddenly have this unwanted pregnancy. The result is that you're either going to go through the pregnancy and keep the baby, which a lot of these girls can't afford to with the poor environment they grow up in, but then somebody's got to pay the price of this unwanted baby, and the boyfriend doesn't, and this young girl doesn't. And the price to be paid for this unwanted pregnancy is the price is the life of the baby.
And Denise, you've got a success story for us, very briefly. Just mention one counselling success that you've had.
Yes, this young mother came to me with abortion very highly on her mind, and the Lord intervened, and this baby arrived recently. It's one of our latest babies to arrive, and I've called her Rose. We name all our babies the name of flowers because obviously it's confidential. And she's been given a wonderful a set of adoptive parents that are very excited to be able to take her into their home and love her and bring up in the Lord's way.
In His ways. Well, Denise, thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your pearls of wisdom. With 77,000 abortions taking place last year and a 35% increase in the rate of abortion in our country alone, we certainly see the need for Christians and for churches and counsellors to step in the gap and offer women another alternative. Thank you for watching. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Abortion on demand is a national shame on South African society. As we have heard, the Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act was enacted in 1996 to provide women with safe access to abortion services and eradicate backstreet abortions. However, despite abortions being legal in South Africa for more than 16 years, at taxpayers' expense, backstreet abortions are still flourishing. Abortion laws, like so many of our laws, have not solved the problems of irresponsible behavior. In fact, abortion in South Africa has become a form of contraception. The loss of innocent life is staggering. More than 1 million unborn citizens murdered in the womb because they inconvenienced the mother. Many women regard abortion as a similar procedure to removing a wart. They believe they are removing a blob of tissue. But that is not what the scriptures teach us. Psalm 139 in particular helps us understand that God is the author of life and that we were fearfully and wonderfully made in our mother's womb. The nation's callous disregard of the sanctity of life has propagated a culture of death in South Africa, a culture of death that has propagated one of the highest murder rates in the world. But the question you and I have to answer is, why are the people who advocate abortion on demand more committed and passionate than those who are called to protect innocent life? But since it became legal, the church appears to have shrugged its shoulders and adjusted to this grisly policy. The Church of Christ is the conscience of the nation. You and I must never accept any policies that conflict with biblical standards. We must continue the fight to restore the sanctity of life in South Africa. The pro-life movement in South Africa needs more champions and more support from the Christian church. The abortion holocaust is a blight on this nation. We must not rest until it is eradicated in South Africa. And that's my summary. Next week, Watchmen on the Wall will address the pornography plague in South Africa. The Sunday rapist is currently appearing in court for a number of rapes and the murder of a young girl, and recently admitted his addiction to pornography. There are many other examples of rapists and murderers using pornography. So why is pornography so easily available on the internet and on TV in South Africa? We will tackle that topic next week on Watchmen on the Wall. Please visit our website at familypolicyinstitute.com. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter to stay informed and updated about the many topical issues we face in society. Until next week, God bless you and keep standing. Good night.